Hello, and thank you for joining me again today at episode 62 of the Oikos Family Podcast. I'm Sonja Wood, and I'm calling today's podcast Research. Now, it might be that you clicked on this YouTube video or listening to this podcast thinking that I'm going to be talking about researching and homeschooling and researching homeschooling and all of that. But as I wrote down the title of this podcast, Research, I thought, oops, maybe you're going to think, whoever's listening or watching, is going to think that I'm going to be talking about researching homeschooling or the results of researching of homeschooling, and that's not what I'm going to be talking about. In fact, what I want to talk to you about is a follow-on from the previous podcast about how our son and myself had to do a whole lot of research about sound to be able to create audiobooks for you. And I say our son and myself, but I actually mean mostly him, because he was the one that was doing all the research and then telling me all about it. And then I would pick up little pieces and research a little bit here and a little bit there. But he was doing the lion's share of the research. And I wanted to talk to you about that today because I wanted to say to you that please make time for your children to be able to research things that interest them when they're little. Or even not so little, let's say, okay, I'll give you a practical example. When our son was about 14, he was so fascinated by animation that he wanted to learn all about what it means to be an animator, a cartoonist. And so he was looking into that and talking about it and wanting to be an animator. And so we looked into it deeper, and gave him opportunity. Of course, it has to be monitored because you can't just let children go on to Google and just look at anything. So we would monitor it and we would encourage him to find out everything that he could about this topic that he was fascinated with. And what resulted from that is, one, it was exciting because he was researching something that he was interested in. So that's one point I wanted to make, was give your children time to research because they're learning when they research. They're developing the most incredibly vitally necessary skill for their adult life, especially with the world and technology and the pace at which things move now. For your children, not just to have the skill of researching, but to have the love of it and a passion for learning. If that's what you can impart to your children when they're little, you have done them a huge, huge service, and God as well, because He can use that. God can use that. He can use someone that is passionate about learning. However, if you've had learning experiences at home, where children are just finding learning to be a strain and it's a painful process and they're miserable, then they're going to associate misery and pain and suffering to learning. And they're going to want to be away from it as fast as they possibly can. However, if you pick up from them that they have an interest in a particular area and you go with that and you research it together and you find out the facts, it can be any topic. And in the instance I was using was animation. And so our son learned that this animation wasn't maybe all that he thought it was, because he realized that you have to spend hours and hours and hours maybe just developing one character. Just the animator is drawing one character. Okay. And it takes a very long time for the imagination to result in a product of some kind. And the animator has to guide his imagination in a direction that will result in something that can be used. And so you as a parent are doing pretty much that. You're guiding your children's direction, their imaginations, and you're guiding and directing them in a way where God can use that. That's why I'm using that reference. In fact, I'm just thinking of something now. I'm thinking of an instance whereby a person who was animating something, for an actual movie, was getting very frustrated with this drawing or this animation that they were busy with, very frustrated. And a more senior animator came alongside this person. I witnessed this. So I'm remembering it now. I'm quickly telling you. Came alongside this person and could see that the junior animator was really hitting the wall on this particular project. So the senior older animator with more years experience said, let's go for a walk. And as they went for a walk, he said, just leave that, let's go for a walk. He said to him about how important it is to get distance from your work sometimes so that you can take a break and look at it more from a distance rather than becoming so annoyed and frustrated and stuck in that, and you're reading it, wasting time. Don't do that. Rather just separate yourself from that, go for a walk, and revisit it and come back afresh with renewed energy, with renewed vision, with your imagination refreshed, and then get back to the task at hand. That little lesson taught that person that the senior animator went for a walk with the junior animator, and the senior animator imparted something to that person of great, great worth and value, greater than the actual skill of animation. Because if that person didn't continue in the field of animation but went on to some other field, he would take with him the skill of the importance of getting some distance. Don't get bogged down and frustrated and angry in a situation. Rather, remove yourself from it, refresh yourself, go back anew. So that lesson is a life skill, a valuable lesson that takes time. So just to remind you, back on the topic of dismissing the dread, to remind you to take time to notice those areas in your children where you need to yourself and them and work together, go for the walk and dismiss the dread, and take time to notice the areas where you can research. That's why I spoke about the sound treatment in the previous episode, how we researched. And those skills, those research skills, are skills that aren't just automatically there. They were trained. They took time. And those are the skills now that help the adults in their adult life to not be limited. And also, God can use them mightily. Isn't that exciting? Because there's no limit. It's like if that person has passion, and if that person loves learning and wants to research and find out, there's no end to that. It just is continually moving at such a pace. So you can't, I'm just encouraging you not to get stuck in what needs to happen today in that lesson and in the actual knowledge of that lesson. Rather, get yourself out of that and think about the greater lesson that can happen. I mean, do the lesson as well. As I keep saying, don't just throw it out, because I understand the importance of sequential and formal and concept upon concept. It's important. It's another skill that's been taught. But the reason why I'm bringing the other side to all of this is because it seems to me that a lot of parents are getting very, very focused in the areas of what has to be done in the formal and actually the dread. And so that's why I'm bringing the other side for you to have a look at it from a different perspective and a different point of view, hopefully God's point of view. That's what would be the most important and the most valuable to you. So it's very valuable to me that you taking this time to listen and possibly watch the podcast. But thank you for listening, and I'm looking forward to sharing with you in the next one. And I do hope that by the time I come to speak to you again, you would have had lots of practice in dismissing the dread, and you would have had a lot of fun listening and researching. So again, thank you for listening to this podcast. Bye for now.